Evening, everyone. Welcome to the March 10th meeting of the Town of Arlington Redevelopment Board. I'd like to call this meeting to order. My name is Rachel Zemberry. I'm the chair of the board. Could the other members please introduce yourselves?
Steve Overlack.
Eugene Benson.
Shayna Corman Houston.
Ken Lowe.
And we also have joining us this evening the director of the Department of Planning and Community Development, Claire Ricker.
Thank you.
Great. Let's go ahead and move into our first agenda item, which is a review of the meeting minutes from February 24th, 2025. I'd like to see if any of the board members have any additions or corrections, starting with Steve.
None here.
Jean?
None.
Shayna?
None.
Ken?
None here.
And I don't have any either. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes as submitted?
So motioned.
Second.
We'll take a vote, starting with Steve.
Yes.
Jean?
Yes.
Shayna?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. Those meeting minutes have been approved. Let's move to our second agenda item, which is the continuation of the public hearing for docket number 3798 for 821 Mass Ave. And I will turn it first over to Director Ricker for an update, and then to the applicants for an overview of the modification since our last minute, then to the board for discussion. We'll open this up for public comment, and then the board will we'll turn it back to the board for a discussion about whether or not we'll be able to make a decision this evening. All right, we'll start with Director Ricker.
Great. Thank you very much. So this is a continued hearing from, I believe, January 13th, 2025. There were additional items and updates requested by the board that the applicant has since provided. The board requested revised plans related to the building design and articulation that reduced the number of materials. We're identifying a primary material. The board advised the applicant should take another look at the building architecture relative to adjacent properties, potentially including the roof line, the volume of the facade, removal of the fins, and using a different screening element between the balconies, breaking down the scale. Updated architectural renderings and elevations have been provided, and also a consideration of the east facade that faces the church, almost as a second front facade because it's so visible from Mass Ave. Again, updated architectural renderings and elevations have been provided. The board also requested an updated application that included an update to the full dimensional table, specifically identifying where the entire parcel, including the CVS, is referenced where the new, versus where the new building and its sign alone are being referenced, and updated FAR calculations for both the entirety of the parcel and the building site exclusively have been provided.
Great, thank you very much for that update. And I'd like to turn it over to the applicants. If you could please introduce yourselves and share with the board your highlights of the updates from our last hearing.
Good evening, Madam Chairwoman, members of the board, Director Ricker. My name is Mary Winstanley O'Connor. I represent the applicant. With me is Andy Rojas from Rojas Design. He will go over the changes. I'd like to highlight for the board that, as suggested at the last meeting, Mr. Rojas met with Mr. Lau and Director Ricker in her office on 2 occasions and received productive comments and feedback, and also additional feedback after the meetings, which he incorporated into the revised plans that you have. You did ask for the dimensional sheets with the CVS and the property, and just the property, we provided those. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Rojas. What I do want to mention, though, is my client has the demolition permit for 821 Mass Ave, but a reading of the CVS decision requires that the ARB approve the demolition of that property. I have sent out notices under the town bylaw to all of the abutters that the building will be demolished. And I'm just looking for approval so that my client, and I know there's a representative of the church here, they would like to see the building down as well. So we'd like to get that accomplished if possible.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Rojas.
Thank you. I think I want to start by just mentioning that in the dimensional and parking information, the surveyor, Roper Survey, broke it out so that on one sheet it's the entire site, CVS, and the parcel on which the new building is to be built together, and then the other sheet is of just the new parcel, the new building. As you can see, it's fairly in compliance with everything. I think the only thing that I saw not in compliance is in the new building site only, the lot size, which is understandable because it's really not the full site. So the minimum lot size in the district is 20,000, and this partial lot is 10,490. Other than that, it's compliant, and we tried to keep it compliant and make it compliant in every other way that we saw. In terms of the design, Mary mentioned that I met with Mr. Lau one time with Claire there, and then we did some interim drawings, and then I met with them one more time. And the comments and directions were, and I understand they weren't of the full board, were very clear, and I totally was, in line with them and on board to do them. And I think this set of drawings hopefully represents that. If we could go to you can see it there in the 3D views, but if you could go to like the elevation sheets, and then right there, and we've modified it so that there's many fewer materials. There's really two basic materials. The brick, which we've tried to match, or approximate the CVS brick. We've also used some of the brick detailing from the CVS building onto this building, including like the detail panel on top of the tall element in the middle and elsewhere on the building. And then there's a linear detail strip that runs along the window sills on the CVS building. I just want to get something. So, in terms of the materials, a lot of brick on the base, and then some vertical elements. Also, the brick elements, the parapet is slightly higher now, so there's a modulated parapet layout versus the panel system. The brick detail that I'm talking about, I sent the image with my package, but you can see at CVS that they had these panels, and I thought they would really work at the very tops of some of these taller elements on both facades, actually on 3 facades. And some of this, as you can tell, has a little bit darker brick in it, so we're prepared to use that and do it in a similar, not 100% literal, but in a very similar manner. Again, the panel, we're going to use cornices. We're trying to, if you go down to that CVS photo a little further down, that one, the cornice line and the thickness of the band, we are using that on the first floor, which is also, the building across the street has a strong cornice line and band as well. We're using it on the first floor of the elevation at the front facade, and also incorporating the signage band within a certain depth there. And this is the black, which is for the railings and the storefront systems, and also the decking on the decks. I'll answer any questions about that later. We've tried to, first of all, keep the number of materials down, which we have. We've simplified that. We've made the signage band bigger, so it's more visible. We've expressed some of the more vertical elements in the building to reflect the tower, the church, while at the same time trying to use some of the CVS materials to somehow knit this together, which is not easy, but that's what we're trying to do. You can see that both facades, there's no fins now. In fact, the balconies at one end are cantilevered. I think it'll lead to a better look of the massing from Mass Ave and also from the rear. It's going to be more articulated. And we've also, on the first floor, you can see that at the entrances to the retail, the windows next to the doors are now, they used to be all the way down to the ground. Now they actually have a sill on them, and that's the detail line that kind of coordinates with the one at CVS. If you look at this detail at CVS, the reveal and the soldier course that form that linear band also become the windowsills. And we're going to, I thought that was a good idea. It reduces the need for a separate material for the sills, and it worked rather well, and I think we can make it, relate to both buildings well here. The other thing is if you could go down to the next sheet, clear the longer elevations, the side elevations, maybe zoom out a little, is at the corner there on the left-hand side of that, which is Mass Ave, the left-hand side right there. You can see that almost everywhere else the windows are single windows or double windows, but there on that corner we're using triple windows on all 3 floors. And if you look at a couple of the church elevations, at the corner there they do have triple windows, so we were trying to maybe make that stand out a bit more. And also wrapping the panel material from the front facade back on the side facade while having the brick, base continue. We thought that helped to modulate the kind of massing of the building. And as you can see, the parapet walls on the brick areas is slightly higher. It's about 18 inches higher than the parapet level at the panel areas. Other than that, if you look at the floor plans, you can go up, Claire, just point out keep going. There, that's fine. On the plan on the right, the ground floor, you can see, the plan on the left, the ground floor, you can see that the entrance in the middle projects out a bit to form that kind of brick, vertical element tower in the middle of it. And you can see what happens on the second floor next to it, that it becomes a little sitting area. It's actually part of the unit. We're still working on that, but we think it's a nice entry, and it separates the idea of going directly into the living room as an entrance to the unit. The building still has, like we showed last time, 4 units. The first floor on the rear is an accessible 1-bedroom unit. Above that is a 2-bedroom duplex unit, and then the 2 units that are basically fronting Mass Ave are floor-throughs on the second floor and third floor, and they're 4 bedrooms.
Great.
And I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Great. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. I'll turn it over to the board members for any question or comments, starting with, actually, why don't we start with you, Ken, since you worked with the applicant a little bit.
Okay. Well, thank you for taking the discussions we had and following through some of it. I do have 3 questions here for you. One is, when you look at let's look at the SketchUp model on the cover sheet.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, is it just the SketchUp model, or?
No, that's a still from a SketchUp model.
But I was hoping to get a little more shadow line and a little more depth in the elevation. Right now, it's kind of flat. So where there's your panels and then just the brick veneer and then
Yep.
your panels, there should be at least 4 inches of a relief.
A reveal? Yep.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
so it shows
Yep.
more of a shadow, and it breaks up the elevation a little bit. And then if you go and look at the one above it, look at the elevations. Let's look at the side elevation and the rear tower in the back. This one here.
Yes.
It's different from the front one, and it looks very awkward to me right now because it looks like it's cantilevered out over the floor there, and it doesn't look like it's balanced. How you got away with that in the front is you had these little small wing walls that came out and created a space there. I think you can do that in the same thing on this side here. It'll make the tower come down or something, and it won't look like it's so precariously slump, teetering on that edge there.
We'll look at that, for sure.
I don't think that's going to add any FAR or anything like that, because it's
No,
outside
no,
space.
it wouldn't.
Okay. And then I appreciate the fact that you started undulating the top corners. Before it was this large, huge cornice, that was one big flat thing. Now you've broken it down, and now it goes up and down, in and out. It brings up the scale, brings down scale a lot. How you turn the corners at the outside corner, you decide just to chop it off and have it chamfered or something like that?
Yeah, there are chamfers for that.
No, but up at the outside corner, it comes and stops. It doesn't turn the corner. It kind of bothers me. I'll let...
Do you mean the panel area?
The cornice.
The panel area, Mr. Lau?
No, the cornice. If you look at go
Oh,
back...
at the cornice. Oh, no. That's a problem in the SketchUp model. It's got to be mitered. If you're talking on the image on the SketchUp model, the cornice will definitely be mitered. That's a SketchUp model problem.
So if you look at the outside corner, at all the cornices, someone just sliced it right there and turned the corner.
That's what you said, it's a modeling area?
No, it's on the SketchUp model for
Okay.
sure.
The elevation.
Yeah, that's good. They're all going to be mitered. They're supposed to come to a miter.
Okay. Then that to me gives me a lot of relief, okay? Because when I first look at that, I'm like...
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, that's a graphical error. It's definitely not the intention.
And I appreciate your sign ban up front. It looks now like it's getting toward a mixed-use building. Before, it looked more like just a residential building up there. And we really want to activate the streetscape. And by having it a little more pronounced as retail, I appreciate that. I think that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Ken. I'll jump in next. I agree with Ken that I think the sign band is better at the storefronts. It does read like a mixed-use building now. I'm actually really struggling with the flatness with this new tower element. The massing feels very heavy-handed to me. And I think a lot of this, I was trying to figure out, to think about how I was going to articulate, because I want to be very clear about some of the challenges that I'm having in mixed-use buildings such as this, when you have a different material at the first floor versus the commercial versus the areas above, or where you have, for example, a soldier course of brick between the second and third floor, and what is a really challenging mass of brick above that is, I think, very imposing to the street. Often that is a band, whether it's a, cast stone, band of a different color, it's a cream, or, there's some more articulation to the building. This feels, even with the soldier course, as if it's going to read very flat. The same with the sill below the windows in the brick and the lintel above, that those are the same brick and not a contrasting color. Doesn't help the matter. At the base, again, this is all reading very monolithic. I would expect a different, a cast stone or some sort of a coloration and depth difference at your water table, your base and your water table. In the side of the building, we asked you to really think about that approach from Mass Ave, from Arlington Center.
That view.
That corner in particular, and that's really challenging, looking at the side of this brick tower that, again, I'm really struggling with from a massing perspective. as well as the flat change in material from the fiber cement panel to the brick that's in plane, a cornice that doesn't wrap to articulate a volume, it's just a flat cornice. I'm really struggling with the changes here. I also don't love the recessed entry at the brick facade. If there is some sort of a tower element, why the entrance didn't move out with it to create a vestibule, it just seems like a really imposing space that's been created. Whether there should be windows or some sort of an articulation on the side, that I'm just really struggling with the tower right now. And I do appreciate the reduction in materials, and again, whether this remains with the vertical changes or whether this is a brick building that, more often what you would see in a mixed-use brick building is a wrapped first floor, whether it's through metal panel or wood or, some other treatment. I'm struggling with this architecturally, but I will hand it over to Sheena.
Excuse me. I actually have nothing that my colleagues have not already raised.
Thank you. Jean?
Yeah, thank you. I have a few things. One is, one of the standards that we have to meet is whether this building is related harmoniously to, among other things, the architecture of existing buildings in the vicinity, and I think it does meet that standard as I see it. I also have some concerns about the central tower, and I think it needs some work, but other than that, I would be okay with the building. When you talked about needing to get the stormwater plan approved by the town at some point, and the potential of pervious pavement, if necessary, I think it would be good to put impervious pavements around where you're going to have the walking areas around. So I think that would be
We could certainly do that, and we have submitted some of the stormwater.
right.
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
Right. I think but
Yeah.
you're like, we'll put pervious pavement if. I think it would make sense
To do it regardless.
Anyhow.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I think that's all. Oh, the only other question I have is, in the commercial spaces, there's the wall between the two commercial spaces. Is that not a load-bearing wall, so it could be taken down?
It could be taken down, if not 100% in its entirety, in most of it. We haven't done the structural design yet, but we don't think all of it would need to stay.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that if you end up with one tenant.
Yeah, it's flexible enough that it will work for one tenant.
Okay. Yeah, those are my only comments.
Great, thank you, Jean. Steve?
Sure. I have three comments. One regarding the minimum lot size.
Yes.
In this particular district, there are two sets of dimensional regulations based on lot size. So one is under 20,000 and one is 20,000 or above. So there is no minimum lot size for mixed use in this district. So you're actually okay there.
Okay, good. Again, the surveyor was a little confused as well. He didn't quite know how to tackle that.
Okay. Number two is I do like the addition of the little nook up front, and thought maybe even perhaps, I don't know, what are the dimensions of that little area roughly?
I think it's something like 6 by 8,
Yeah, I mean,
maybe 7 by 8.
When I saw it, my first, the first thought I had was if there was a little door there, then that would make a great little video conferencing room. Which
Mr. Lau had said once that, it could be a little, office space for somebody.
but overall, I think this is, this is an improvement over where we were last time, and I think it looks a lot better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board before we open for public comment?
I guess just one other thing, the amount of bicycle parking may depend on who the tenants are and what the use of the property is. So I think if we issue a special permit, we'll have to.
You mean the retail and office?
Yeah, there's
Oh, I
difference.
see. Yeah. Okay, I get it. Yep.
Yep, we'll have a, just to clear, Mr. Lau asked if we would be able, if the board was going to continue the discussion after public comments, so I just confirmed that that is the case. Okay, so at this point, I'd like to open the floor for public comment. Anyone who wishes to speak this evening, if you could please raise your hand. You will have up to 2 minutes to address the board. We will take questions, but we won't answer questions during the public comment period. And if I could ask, could we move the microphone so that they can come over here, unless you think that they will pick them up in the room?
Move it. Yeah. Please move it.
Thank you so much. So I'll ask anyone coming up to speak to please come to this seat here at the front. Yes. And again, a reminder, please introduce yourself first, last name, and address before you begin your up to 2 minutes.
Do I sit? Okay. Hi, my name is Marina Popova. I live on 255 Rich Street. I just wanted again to state that there were about 460 people who signed the petition asking to please save the pine, which is not that hard to do if only there is a will. And I hope that you seriously consider that, because it's a wish of hundreds of people in Arlington residents, and that you would give that a higher priority over whatever interests other parties have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers this evening? Yes, please.
Hi, Susan Stamps on the tree committee, but not speaking for the tree committee. I'm sorry I arrived a little late.
Address, please, Susan.
I'm sorry, 39 Grafton Street, East Arlington. I arrived a little late, but I had looked at the drawings online, and I didn't see where it showed that the applicant was going to be planting the street trees every 25 feet. But I think that maybe something just flashed by that showed that. So I want to confirm that that was going to be done. And okay.
Just a minute, excuse me, Mr. Rojas. We're just going to take public comment at this time. We'll answer the questions later. Thank you.
All right, thank you. But also I want to confirm that those are going to be large shade trees unless there are wires there, so that they have to be smaller. So maybe if the applicant could answer that. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Any other speakers for public comment? Yes.
Good evening, board members. John Worden, 27 Jason Street. In a way, this whole thing is about this new building and so on is my fault, because years ago, a lot of years ago now, CVS came in and wanted to reopen the permit so they could, I think, change their sign or something. And since the thing was open, I raised the question of the point that the owner of this building, who owns the whole lot there, was letting it mercilessly deteriorate, real eyesore, on the street, although it's a historical building, which is now doomed, and that something should be done about it. Well, as a result of that, affordable housing town, now what's it called, the Arlington,
Historical Commission.
no, the, what do they call them, I'm sorry, the people that run they have a new building down on Broadway, they've got a bunch of buildings up near the Heights.
HCA.
The Housing Corporation of Arlington.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, Housing Corporation of Arlington. The then president of that organization, and my wife was then the chairman of the Housing Authority, worked out a plan to redevelop the house and an addition to be built to the rear for affordable housing. But the owner would only give a 10-year lease, which they said would not make it economically viable. So for 10 years, they let the building just continue to disintegrate. So then this other project came along, and now the building will get totally disintegrated. But but the one thing that was mentioned by a previous speaker is that the specimen pine tree in the front yard to the right, but almost between the building and the church. Is that to remain?
We're happy to answer that question after public comment is.
Okay, that question will be answered, though.
Yes, yes, we will
I
address that
hope it
question.
will, because at least that will remain of a site which is, this house was the home of Dr. Atwood, who was the town physician during
You're
the...
at time. Did you have any other topics to bring up to the board?
Oh, I will, but that is the second part of your meeting tonight.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Yes, please.
Hi, Peter Bloom, Jason Terrace. I've been living on Jason Terrace 38 years now. I have a good view of the Austrian pine that John referenced. It's a very unique silhouette as trees go in the neighborhood. I heard a lot of talking points about addressing how this new building would mesh with the architecture of the CVS to the left. I heard only token references to how it would attempt to make peace with the church on the right. And the church is just really the architectural gem of that whole neighborhood in terms of Mass Ave. And the irony isn't lost on me that in seeking relief from the redevelopment board to be excused from the 15-foot buffer zone between this project and the church, they are, from what I understand, their intention, last I heard, was to deprive the town of any relief from the view of this new building. I don't mean to cast any aspersions on the building itself. I'm sure it took a lot of work to do all these reworkings of the architecture to help answer your concerns. It just looks completely out of place next to that gorgeous church, and I'm going to regret not having thought of some other way to help preserve the Atwood House and this landscaping around it. I think a lot of people will be really shocked when they see the final product, and eventually they'll get used to the idea that the tree is gone and the Atwood House is gone, but that will take a while. I'm puzzled by the addition of some Austrian pine trees in the back of the lot as a token gesture towards taking down the 100-year-old tree in the front, since no one's even going to be able to see those for decades from the street. In any case, I don't mean to write off the possibility that maybe they've reconsidered whether to take the tree out. I know it's inconvenient from a practical perspective, but clearly this building is going to benefit greatly from the view of the church, which everybody loves to see as they pass by.
You're at time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else this evening? Okay. So with that, we will close public comment, and I will turn it over just pose to the applicant. My understanding with the siting of the building is, as we've discussed before, that the tree which is experiencing has been experiencing some health issues for some time, is planned to be removed as part of this development.
Yes.
It is, in order to follow the street line set along Mass Ave.
Correct, okay. And I know that we had also discussed that even if the building was shifted slightly, that the impact on the root system would not allow the tree to...
Correct. And we've had 2 arborists look at that.
Correct. Thank you very much, just for clarification. So I'll turn it back over to the board now for discussion. I personally have a lot of challenges with the new architecture that is being proposed, and without some significant modifications, I think I'd have a hard time. I'm not going to be able to get to it yes personally tonight, but I'm interested in the other board members' feelings on the matter, starting with Sheena.
So it is not the building that I had hoped to see. It has come a long way. I think if the other board members were prepared to move forward with this, I would be able to also move forward.
Okay, thank you. Jean?
I would move forward with the proviso that they meet with either you or Ken or both and try to work out something about the tower that's acceptable. And there are many, many conditions we would put in addition on the permit.
Steve?
I agree with Mr. Benson.
Ken?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind talking about some of your issues.
Sure,
You
I'm
have
happy
there.
to.
I think your idea about moving the front door out to create a vestibule there is a good one, and I'm assuming you guys are willing to do that. And then, when I look at the elevation, the front elevation, it shows the roof elevation at 129 plus whatever that is. So the parapet is what, 6 feet high?
No, it's about 5 feet high.
5 feet high, okay. I was just,
Yeah, no, that's close enough.
does it have to be that high?
Does it have to be?
Yeah.
No, I mean, we obviously need to be above guard height. We also really didn't want people to feel like they should put things on top of the parapet, so we dissuaded it. We also, at one point, sent you a detail of what the cap would be like, so that it's not flat and people don't put stuff on it. It doesn't have to be, it could be down a little more, but we felt that it would be, good privacy up there for the people on the deck.
I'm just trying to address the concerns that this is very imposing. And I agree with Rachel here. The tower, the center tower, what's in that space?
What do you mean? I'm sorry, where? In the floor plan, it's,
What's in here?
that's the stair tower on the roof that continues up. And there's nothing up there. No, it could be storage up there, but it could move back if that's what you're after.
Well, I'm trying to address Rachel's concern.
Yeah.
That, the central tower is very imposing, okay? I don't think your SketchUp will go back to the speaker, I apologize. I don't think your SketchUp model, in the coloring it, does it justice. I think if you lighten up the brick a little bit, because it shows it very brown right now, and it's very oppressive right now, okay? If you line the brick up a little bit, because if you look at the CVS brick, it's more reddish and has higher...
And again, that's a graphical problem, and I
Which is fine.
apologize.
I acknowledge that, same with the
Yeah.
cornice and everything, okay?
Yeah.
But I think if we think of this as something that's a little lighter
Yep.
and a little warmer, then, because the brown color brings off a very cold image to me.
Okay.
And then if we can lower the parapet and lower, and maybe push back and slope back the tower a little bit,
Yeah.
so it won't be as imposing. I'm okay, what Gene said, I'm willing to sit down with you and just move this along, and work out some of these smaller details. I think, we've been at this for what, a year and a half now? 2 years?
We have, and I'm concerned that this is where we still are. So my concern is the ability to be able to work through this without coming in front of the board. So, the tower is one item. The flatness of the facade, the lack of that soldier course not being a contrasting brick or, again, some sort of an Ariscraft or precast concrete element as you would typically see in a mixed-use building with residential above. That is what I would expect to see in a building with a brick facade at the residential portion. Again, I think it's a missed opportunity to not have a contrasting water table and base detail. I'm concerned about the flatness of these materials meeting together, the fact that they're not a real volume, the parapet doesn't turn. Looking at the side of this building from Mass Ave, from coming down from Arlington Center, that's a really important corner, and I don't think that it currently, I don't think it does the streetscape any favors. I agree that matching some of the brick details in this from CVS, that's not enough. This is an important building in the streetscape of Mass Ave, and I don't think we're there yet. That's my opinion.
Okay. I would also add, I like Steve's suggestion of having a door there, or sliding door, or patio door that would lead out from that tower room out to the deck. That only activates that room and engages that patio a little bit more.
One of the other issues I have as well, it looks like, and perhaps you can confirm this from the rendering, that the 3 windows on the side of that corner there's no datum. They're not at the same datum as the transom windows above the larger, I believe those are sliding doors or bifold doors onto the terrace. So it's not, there's another level of detail that is completely missing from this, including ensuring that we have windows that work all the way around this, if the tower remains, the banding, what happens at the base, the cantilever in the back, that, silly little projection from the cornice above the 2 doors on the side of this. Sorry, I'm looking at the rendering, Claire. There's just a lot that's unresolved here, and I would feel like I did the town a disservice if I voted this evening.
The projection, you mean the canopy over those
Canopy.
doors?
I would agree with what you said, except for the one thing I would probably maybe see it a little differently is your precast headers above the windows. I think
The headers and the sills?
I think we made a point saying that we wanted less differential materials and have less busy. So I was okay with having the sills and headers, having a roll-lock and soldier coursing above the windows. I thought that was enough of a distinction between the windows and stuff like that. I do agree with you that there's no datum, when the windows turn the corner, we can work on that. You know, I would tend to agree with the rest of the board right now, saying that with administrative approval and some guidance from us, I'd be okay to approve it. But I'll leave the rest of the board's opinion.
Well, yeah, I understand the chair has some reservations. And what I'm wondering is, as I've been sitting here listening, and I'm a software developer, not an architect, I get the gist of what you're saying, but there's, a certain level of subtlety of your comments that just, I can't quite get my head around, because I'm not an architect. I'm wondering, what can we give the applicant in terms of direction? So, I mean, not so much in terms of, I think voicing concerns is valuable, but I'm wondering if, just something a little more, you need to do this here, might be appropriate.
Yeah, I feel like I've given a list here, and I'm happy to, if whether we decide to approve or approve with, not approve or approve with conditions, I'm happy to provide Steve that list, including, again, if the tower remains, remove the, as Ken was talking about, to reduce the height of the parapet. Again, some of the articulation that I think is really important on the, at the story, between each one of the levels, as well as the sill and the lintel for the windows. Again,
yeah, and
I don't think, again, that the building, I don't think we're going to be happy with the flatness of the building and the way that these materials come together, because these are, when you use materials in this way, they're meant to be volumes, and they're not reading as volumes now.
Okay. Yeah, and I did like the idea about having some sort of a cast stone fixture up on top. I think that would, that could potentially break things up rather nicely.
Gene?
I mean, my feelings were very similar to Steve's, in that if we are going to say, let's not issue a permit tonight, but let's postpone one more time, that you and or Ken should meet with them so we don't come back in 2 weeks or a month and are in the same situation again. So if you and Ken and others here think it's better to continue this one more time, I'm willing to do that. But I think they need, if I were them, I would like, hey, I want to sit down with somebody and work out what's ever left to be done to make this happen. So we can either do that by continuing one more time, or do that by approving conditionally on reaching an agreement on it.
Yeah. I would just like to, if we do continue, I would like Mr. Rojas to have the ability to either feel like he has a clear direction on what to change, or has the opportunity to talk with either Ms. Embry or Mr. Lau.
Okay. Shana?
I agree with my colleagues.
Okay. Yes.
First of all, I think that's a great idea. I would rather meet, because I am a little confused. I do get conflicting signals about reduce the number of materials and make it less busy, and at the same time adding these feature strips or so on. And I understand the logic behind both, but I'd like to nail it down through 1 or 2 meetings and get it right.
I'd be happy to provide feedback. I think that having 4 different competing materials that were each denoting different volumes is very different than adding a cast stone sill, articulating the base, adding the elements that really make a building come alive, that add shadow lines. Again, some of these were about volume, about where the volume was too large versus where it was not pulled out enough. It sounds like some of those are already things that Mr. Lau has shared with you that haven't yet been reflected. So, that's part of the reason why I think I would feel more comfortable if we got to a better place personally, again, and if the rest of the board decides to vote this evening, that's fine. But I feel like there is still a lot of work to do to get this to a place that I'm
That's
comfortable
fine.
with.
Can I meet with you? I mean, I think,
We will, yes, let's see when we will continue the date to, and then we'll find a time.
okay, great, thank you.
Madam
Yes.
Chair, I would like if we could have a vote tonight on the demolition. We have the
Procedurally,
permit.
what's that?
We have the demolition permit, but the CVS permit specifically provides that the ARB needs to approve the demolition.
What I think we could do, we do need to open the CVS permit
It
in
was open.
order,
Yeah.
well, it's open, but we would need this evening to modify that permit rather than vote specifically on this new permit, I believe. Jean, do you agree with that? Yeah, so that's how we would do that this evening.
Thank you.
And again, we'll discuss that then when we reopen in order to continue, if we decide to do that the second.
While she's there, I just wanted to point out that to the young lady that mentioned the street trees, that's them right there. 25 feet on center. Some of them are existing, but where they're not existing, we show new ones.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, that's the drawing, though,
Thank you.
forgot.
Thank you. I believe that there are requirements within.
There are.
Yes, that we will ask them to follow. All right. So, does somebody have a motion that they would like to make?
All right, I'll take it. What I think I'm hearing more of a desire to do one more round. So I would first ask when the applicants are available to come back, and then would be prepared to make a motion to continue it until that date.
We look at the calendar.
We can. So
I mean, assuming I can meet with them soon, we can come back anytime.
we are regularly
We'll
scheduled to
hustle it
meet
at this point.
the 17th and the 20th. The 17th is busy. The 24th is the second part of the brewery. April 10th, we are talking about the ARB report. Are we meeting on April 24th?
We are not. That's a Thursday.
It's a Thursday, excuse me.
We are meeting on April 14th.
April 14th would be the next, I think.
April 14th would be the
available
next
meeting.
available meeting.
Yes.
Let's do it.
Does that work for you? Otherwise, we
It
could
does.
push.
It does, I mean,
to May.
assuming that we can get together with you guys, sooner rather than later.
Yep, I think the sooner that we put a date on the calendar that would be better.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
give you time, yes. So, Steve, the motion would need to be crafted then for a continuance to April 14th.
Okay, so in that case, I move that the hearing for docket
3798.
3798 for 821 Mass Ave be continued until April 14th.
Second,
We'll take a vote, starting with Steve.
Yes.
Jean?
yes.
Shayna?
Yes.
Ken?
I guess I'll vote yes then.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm a yes as well. So we will set up a time to meet, and then see you back on April 14th.
Should I coordinate with Claire?
Yes, if we can coordinate.
Please do.
With Claire, that would
Thank
be
you.
fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're not going to
Yes.
do anything with the request?
We're going to open that's our next agenda item.
All right.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely. So the next item on our meeting agenda is the public hearing for docket number 3348 for 821 to 837 Massachusetts Avenue. I do need, Claire, do you have the original decision available so that we can modify, unless you have that?
I didn't bring it.
Yeah, I wasn't-
That's my only challenge right now with doing that is, had we known ahead of time, we could have that ready to queue up.
Right.
Let me see.
I don't have it either.
What was the previous meeting before this one?
The 13th, I'm just looking at that right now to see if that was included in the meeting materials. I don't believe it was. It was not.
I'm checking the registry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
The other option would be,
Something there.
I have the 2009 decision and the
It's in there
2000.
at the end.
which,
She has the CVS decision.
no, I understand. Do you know which of the conditions or?
It's at the very end of the decision.
Thank you.
There's nothing in condition 5 that indicates that the ARB would need to vote on demolishing the house. Is there another condition that you think speaks to that?
No, that was the only one.
That was the only one.
What do you think, Gene?
I haven't read the whole thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Claire, can we go back to 5? My
Sure.
only concern, we need to amend the special permit for the redevelopment of the house, which we've identified the language for when we are ready to vote on the new permit.
Can I ask Attorney Stanley a question?
Yes, of course.
Why do you think we need to approve the demolition?
My reading of that, number 5.
The whole thing, or any particular sentence you'd like to point
Just,
out?
we have the demolition permit, but my reading of it is that the ARB had the authority to designate when it is demolished. And if you remember, town council had you continue the hearing months ago because both permits have to be opened for you to act.
What I don't know, and I really can't decide, is do we have to approve the redevelopment before we do that or not? And
I don't read it like that.
I don't know.
So, given that this request came this evening and the board has not had a chance to review that, we do have a meeting each of the next coming Monday nights and could put this particular,
Okay.
We don't need to wait until April 14th.
That would be good.
So if it would work for the board, Steve?
Yeah, yes, I mean, I could, without trying to word I could propose an edit to the existing condition 5, or we could possibly just vote to amend the condition 5 of the, condition 5 by saying that we will permit the applicant to demolish the existing structure as of March 10th, 2025.
So
So it'd be like,
I definitely could propose language based on the language that we were intending to use for the modification, which would be to move that the board's decision regarding docket number 3348 issued on or about April 13th, 2009, and amended by the board's decision on or about November 4th, 2019, be further amended by modifying special condition number 5 to allow for the demolition of the Atwood House. The question is whether or not the board would like to do that ahead of the issuance of the new special permit. And that, I think, is what the board should discuss this evening with this request.
okay. So as far as my preference, I don't, from my understanding, is the structure as it exists now isn't really salvageable. And I'm just thinking, thinking through decision trees, if we were to, say, grant the permission to demolish the structure but did not approve the proposed mixed-use building, we'd basically be left with a vacant piece of land until such time as someone had a new...
giant hole that,
Okay, fair.
yep. Jean?
I think there's some benefit to keep the old building there until we approve the new one. But I think it's a close call, but that's where I come down.
Gina?
I agree. I think, if they were prepared to regrade and seed and all of that, I might feel differently, but on balance, I think since we're so close, hopefully, to approving the special permit, I'd like to play it out a little bit longer.
Kim?
Actually, I like Shannon's idea of if we approve the demo and saying, just in case we don't approve the other special permit for the mixed-use building, and it sits, that they would just fill in the hole and seed it with some loom to make it, just so it's not a hole and an eyesore, because it's an eyesore right now. All the porches have been removed. It's surrounded by structured fence, all that kind of stuff there. So I think it could be a win-win that way there. But with that added stipulation, I'm very comfortable with that.
Yeah. If they were to do that.
You have agreed, yeah.
Okay. Any other, I will open this docket up for public comment since this is a public hearing. Any other discussion from the board before I do so?
I would,
Can I just ask?
Please.
The thought is that to knock it down, and if the construction does not occur, that it has to be filled in and seeded and graded, and is that what?
I think that's one of the
Okay, that's
proposals
not-
from the board, but I'm still thinking through whether I feel comfortable with approving a demolition ahead of the special permit, given some of the challenges we've had with getting this project moving and the maintenance on the site to date.
and the time it took the owner to even come to the table.
That's exactly right. Any other comments from the board before we open this for public comment? Okay. So I'd like to open docket 3348 for public comment. If anyone would like to speak on this public hearing, please raise your hand. Okay, yes. Again, please introduce yourself first, last name and address, and you'll have up to 2 minutes to address the board.
Peter Bloom, Jason Terrace. I just feel like this is a selling out of the streetscape for the town. This is the primary avenue for the town. And as fine as this building might look in all kinds of other places, I just think it's a terrible response to the church on its right. And I think a lot of people are going to be really shocked to see this.
I'm sorry, are you speaking to the demolition request? Because that's what we're opening public comment for this evening.
Fair point. Okay, so I'll redirect back to the...
Sure.
I know that the chain link fence doesn't look nice. I know the missing porches don't look nice. But these are all by design. These aren't by accident. This is how the property was neglected for the last 12 years. And I feel like there's a risk of rewarding this kind of behavior, and I'm concerned about how this reflects a message to future developers with other properties and what they can get away with as far as being bad neighbors. And what can they get to make a few extra bucks and bring in a few extra tax dollars. And what do we sacrifice in the process? We sacrifice our streetscape. So I just don't think it's a good trade-off. I know it's a losing battle to save the house, but I mean, I was reading what was up on the screen a little while ago about how there were supposed to be diligent efforts to maintain this property in its current condition. That's laughable. I mean, there was no such effort made. The opposite was made. So I'm comfortable with rewarding the treatment of this property with concessions that compromise the integrity of the streetscape. So that's it.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, so with that, we will close public comment for 3348. Jean?
I think it's whether we want a chain link fence with a hole in the ground or a chain link fence with a fallen down building behind it.
Yes.
Yes, that's the choice you're giving us, right? And I don't like either option, but I guess I sort of think on balance, it'd be better to keep the house up until there's a new approved plan. But I could be persuaded otherwise.
Steve?
If I may, through you, Madam Chair, direct a question to Attorney Winstanley O'Connor.
Yes.
What was the motivation for wanting the demolition permit tonight? I mean, you have the permit, so you can...
Frankly, we talked, it would not be my style to just go do it without coming back to the board because of that decision.
But
the reason being is that I think the church would like to see it done. So I could be speaking out of turn. I have talked to the representatives of the church.
Okay, so it's not due to anything like a construction schedule or a timer taking out, it's out of consideration for the owners of the church property. Okay.
Can we ask?
Is that something, do we have I'm not sure if you are speaking or a representative of the church that we could ask that question to? Is that the preference of the?
Well, okay, because the property is private, we technically don't have any say in its development, but this project has been going on for way too long. I think the board has acknowledged this, and the house has become a blight, admittedly. And something needs to move on. And if it means demolishing it, filling in the hole, this is just me talking, I don't represent the church, I can't represent the church on this, but just filling in the hole, getting it seeded, nice green lawn, so the fence can come down, and then once we have some clear direction on what will be going in that spot, then it can resume. But it's just a blight, and it looks horrible to those of us who attend First Baptist.
Thank you.
So I think my personal preference would be to allow the demolition, but make it conditional on, if give a fixed period of time from now either the special permit for the mixed-use building has to have been approved, or the site needs to be regraded and filled in and seeded.
Sheena?
So I might suggest that we would want the hole filled and the seating to happen regardless, unless construction was going to begin in the short term. But I agree with Steve that I'd like to see the house come down with the requirement that the hole be filled, the site be seeded.
So, I'm assuming that we're months, 6 to 12 months at best away from any type of construction starting on that site, between construction documents, permits, mobilization, et cetera.
I'm not sure of that time frame, but I'd say you're not off by much.
Right. So I think this is a question, and you may not be able to answer this evening, in which case we would continue this discussion to next week or another time as to whether or not the owner would be amenable to the expense and the undertaking of filling the hole and regrading in order for the board to vote on that condition for the immediate
I'm not.
demolition of
But
the
if I could ask you to put it on for March 24th, I can have an answer.
Okay, other thoughts? We can certainly, we need to continue this hearing anyway, and we
No,
certainly.
I agree with you. If you tear the building down right now, it'll probably take you, 3 weeks to tear it down and make it safe? You're not going to put a shovel in the ground for another year. Through working drawings, bid negotiations, and selecting contractors and everything else, that's at least a year away. So I would agree. If you can tear it down, you got to fill the hole up and make it look sort of nice. You know, I'm not asking you to plant big trees there, but just, some seed. And so the kids who are playing in the daycare center don't really see
Don't fall in the hole.
yeah.
So with
Make it
that,
safe, yeah.
what I'd like to do, sorry, did you have?
No.
Okay, what I'd like to do is see if we have a motion, you had said March 24th?
I'm going to be here that night, that's why.
Okay. Two birds, one stone. Okay. So what else do we have on that? I mean, this hopefully will be a, are you willing to make that concession or not? So not a long hearing, I would assume.
Well, I'm here for the brewery that night.
Right. I'm just thinking about our overall schedule,
Right,
which is
right.
lengthy for that evening.
Right.
Um,
We have our map amendments
Great.
also.
We have our map amendments
Jeff
that
agrees to
evening.
it. Should be easy.
Okay, so again, if that's what the board's consensus is and we're looking for a yes, we agree, or no, I would be comfortable with putting that on for the 24th. What are the other board members?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so is there a motion to continue docket 3348 for 821 to 837 Mass Ave to March 24th?
To wait for an answer from the ownership about filling in the hole.
Correct, to
Yeah.
move forward with the discussion specifically regarding the timing and conditions for the demolition of the house.
So motion.
Second.
So moved.
Okay, we'll take a vote, starting with Steve.
Yes.
Jean?
Yes.
Shayna?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right. So with that, we will move to agenda, thank you. We'll move to agenda item number 4, which is the public hearing for the warrant articles for 2025 annual town meeting. We will be reopening the continued public hearing for the warrant articles related to the zoning bylaws for spring town meeting. This is our second of 5 nights of hearings as published in the schedule on Novus Agenda for a total of 20 warrant articles. Consistent with the past, we will be discussing the articles and then opening each article for public comment for anyone joining us this evening who would like to speak on each of these articles as scheduled. Anyone wishing to speak will have up to 2 minutes to address the board. The board will then discuss any of the questions raised during the public comment, followed by a discussion. Note that our board will reserve final discussion and voting on each article until the last night of the hearings on April 7th. So with that, let's move to our first article.
If I could, Madam Chair, excuse me, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Article 27, which is the deletion of the Inland Wetland Overlay District, we do have a staff member present this evening who is available to answer questions. David Morgan, who's our environmental planner and conservation agent. If possible, if we could take that up earlier, that would be great. If you'd rather stick with going in sequence as we have them in the agenda, that's also fine.
Thank you. I appreciate that note. Does any member of the board have any concerns with starting with Article 27?
No.
Nope.
No.
All right.
Thank you.
So let's go ahead and start with Article 27, the zoning bylaw amendment related to the deletion of the Inland Wetland Overlay District, and I will turn it over to Director Ricker.
Great, thank you very much. This is an amendment that came before the board last year. The board voted to advance after conversation with the chair of the Conservation Commission and with Mr. Morgan, who is here this evening. The Inland Wetland District Overlay was created over 50 years ago, before the Wetlands Protection Act, as an attempt to achieve wetlands protection through zoning. The Conservation Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals both agree that the Inland Wetland District is outmoded, and as the Conservation Commission supersedes it, it does not make sense for the ZBA to maintain zoning oversight. That is the introduction. Oh, thank you.
Great, thank you. So I'd like to turn it over to our guest this evening. If you could introduce yourself
Sure.
and if there are any comments that you'd like to make about the article, that would be welcome. And then we will turn it over to the board for any questions that they might have.
Great.
Thank you.
I am David Morgan. I am environmental planner and conservation agent for the town, as Claire described. I also am a resident, currently 1253 Mass Ave. As Claire described, we have serious concerns about the relevance and continued use of the Inland Wetland District. I'd like to walk you through the purposes, especially. We can get on to the other parts of the zoning bylaw that are included in this overlay district and describe their relevance and really lack thereof. But I think the purposes are the most significant piece of this. So there are 5, lettered A through E. The first one is to preserve and protect the streams, water bodies, and other water courses, including wetlands in the town of Arlington. That is the purview of the Conservation Commission. We have a significant body of law under the Wetlands Protection Act, its regulations, case law, etc., that speaks to that in the state, and we have a very proactive, ambitious, expert Conservation Commission that can handle that activity. Second is to protect the health and safety of persons and property against the hazards of flooding and contamination. Likewise, the Commission dedicates quite a lot of time to flooding issues. The Commission oversees all of the floodplain, including floodways in Arlington, with performance standards that pertain to the rest of what's included in the district overlay definition. And further, there is a floodplain district, in the zoning bylaw already, which makes this duplicative. Third, preserve and maintain the groundwater table for potential water supplies. There are 8 interests of the Wetlands Protection Act. I think 2 of them are related to water supply. And so again, the Conservation Commission supersedes this overlay district. Fourth, protect the community against detrimental use and development of lands adjoining such water courses. again, the Conservation Commission is tasked with permitting decisions that relate to the development of any such lands or redevelopment of such lands, not just adjoining watercourses, but adjoining any type of wetland. Watercourses, of course, being rivers, primarily, streams, etc.
Could you move the microphone a little closer?
Yeah, try again. How's that? Yeah, I can tell it's better. Thank you. Finally, conserve the watershed areas for health, safety, and welfare of the public. And I think this one's overbroad and vague, quite frankly. There are no associated performance standards. There's no real definition about what the health, safety, and welfare of the public entail in terms of this overlay district. I think Claire mentioned, or at least last time this came up, which was about a year ago, we underscored the fact that the definition of the district is internally inconsistent. And I mean, there are 3 definitions here. I'll go on to talk about those just briefly. A, all lands within the elevations shown on the wetland and floodplain overlay map of the zoning map and its designated wetlands as defined by the Wetlands Protection Act, and it goes on. There are multiple issues with this phrasing. In the first place, wetlands are not defined by elevations. There are many definitions of a wetland. None of them pertain to elevations. The floodplain certainly is so defined, and the floodway is part of that, but that is not the same thing that we're talking about. B, all land areas, along perennial rivers, brooks, streams, as defined by the Wetlands Protection Act and its regulations, as well as our local bylaw and its regulations, promulgated thereunder for a horizontal distance of 200 feet from the center line thereof, are included in the inland wetland district. This is conflictual. The definition of a river or stream, which is subsidiary to the definition of river in the Wetlands Protection Act, is the same with brooks, is not from the center line, but from the bank. And so the Wetlands Protection Act and our local bylaw, the regulations associated with both, afford more protection than is granted by this district. C is all lands designated on the zoning map as having a shallow depth to water table, and it goes on from there, but I don't need to read anymore because there is no such thing. I fumble for words because determining seasonal high groundwater is an incredibly technical and difficult thing to do. We've been through the course of that with the hearings for Thorndike Place most recently, and that is extremely variable, we found. Even on one site, it can vary across, even just 100 feet, it can be 4 feet different according to different measurements, different standards. I would add then that there is no methodology set in this district definition for determining the seasonal high groundwater, and therefore it lacks the teeth to be enforced. And I could go on, but I think that's sufficient for painting the picture as to why this is irrelevant and should really be removed. The bottom line is it's superseded by a body of law that makes quite a bit more sense. There is, well, actually, let me add one more thing. When this was brought up at last year's town meeting, there were objections that followed, I think, 2 lines of thought. The first one was sort of a belt and suspenders approach. We should have zoning support this as well as wetlands law. I think I've made the case sufficiently that that's just not happening, period, and not possible within the scope of this definition. So secondarily, the concern that there would be some lack of oversight or enforcement of wetlands issues and development related thereto if this was repealed. And the concern that was raised at the time was over some terminology that relates to the riverfront area. This is the 200-foot jurisdiction that I described earlier, and whether or not that would be applicable. And by applicable, I mean that the Conservation Commission necessarily would have to make decisions about that area. And that amounted from a considerable amount of confusion, I'll be frank. There was some cherry picking of language that happened in the discussion at town meeting. And I struggle to explain exactly what was meant by that line of reasoning, but I know that the town meeting members' motive was to protect that riverfront area. They were concerned with whether or not the Conservation Commission had the authority to regulate the riverfront area, and more specifically, to require a vegetated buffer in the riverfront area. I think there was some misunderstanding about what that meant, because it seemed to me, having just reviewed the video, that they were talking about requiring that entire area, the 200-foot area, to be vegetated versus developed. And that is not the case. It's not what the law says. I can't think of a single instance where it's ever been interpreted that way, certainly not applied that way, not here, nor anywhere else in the state. So
it sounds like there was a general misunderstanding and misinterpretation.
And I think that there is plenty of room for explanation about the rationale, how things work, et cetera, to town meeting, which I'd be happy to do. And so with that, I turn it over to you and just ask for your support of moving this again.
Great. Thank you very much. So I'll turn it over to the board members for any questions, starting with Steve.
The only question I had was whether there was, in fact, a high water table map, and you said there wasn't, so that takes care of my question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great. Thank you. Jean.
Yeah, a couple of things. One is, I think David made a really nice case for this, a much nicer case than is in the written background. So I think it would be helpful for David to work on the written background so that when we have our report to town meeting, it incorporated a lot of what David said into it. After this was voted down last year, at least 2 or 3, I don't remember how many more people came up to me and said, oh, we sent emails asking questions and we never got an answer, so we voted against it because we never got an answer ahead of time. So I think we need to think about some way where emails come in and they're routed to David so that he can do something in response to them. And I was very confused by some of the questions at town meeting last year, and it felt like, people just didn't really have a good understanding of this, but also, as you said, we're afraid that if this were deleted from the zoning bylaw, there would be something somewhere that wasn't covered by the Wetlands Protection Act, that there'd be this little piece somewhere. And I think we need to figure out how to say there is not, if there's not, David, that there's not a little piece somewhere, and I'll just, it seems to me that the other thing we want to look at is, I think this says this was created over 50 years ago, but some parts of it reference the State Wetlands Protection Act and implementing regulations and things like that that came later. So some of this at least has been updated over time. So we have to be careful, I think, about how we describe this. I'll just point out one of the purposes, the one to preserve and maintain the groundwater table for potential water supply purposes. We're never going to use the groundwater for water supply in the town. It's just never going to meet the Safe Drinking Water Act, and the cost of trying to do it would just be astronomical. So even some of these purposes where they might have made sense a long time ago really don't even make sense now. So those are my thoughts about it. And then to make sure that David and someone from the Zoning Board of Appeals is at town meeting and they can make the presentation and answer questions.
Great, thank you, Jean. Shayna?
Nothing further.
Great, Ken?
No, I think Jean said it eloquently enough. We just need to explain ourselves well enough so there's no confusion. Because I believe that's why people voted last time, out of confusion. And if we have enough presenters or representation that there is no inadvertent loss if we delete this. That's the biggest thing that people were nervous about. And if we make ourselves clear enough about that, I think it should be fine.
Great.
Very good.
Anything else before we open it up? Great. So with that, we will open up the floor for public comment for Article 27. Yes, and let's see, can we move microphone? So as our first speaker is coming up to speak, I will just remind everyone to please introduce yourself with your first, last name, and address, and you will have up to 2 minutes to address the board. Yeah, we'll adjust that as you say.
Okay. All right, I assume you can hear me.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I was one of the town meeting members who voted not to abolish the inland wetland district.
Sorry to interrupt, if you could please...
John Worden, 27 Jason Street.
Thank you so much.
Hasn't changed since half an hour ago. One of the town meeting members who voted against revoking this inland wetlands district was I think common perception that we didn't, it was not understood that other laws, as I think the gentleman said, now do as much or more than that district could have ever achieved. So if they have a better presentation, both written and oral, could be made, maybe you'd get rid of it if that's what you want to do. The other thing I'd like to say is, would really be good if you can't meet in a smaller, more appropriate room for a crowd of, how many people do we have here? 6, maybe 8?
We're speaking specifically around Article 27. I'd welcome any comments.
Okay, the other comment I would make that relates to this article, Madam Chairman, is that it's really hard to hear some of the speakers and some of the board members and to hear what they are saying.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any other members of the public wishing to speak on Article 27? So with that, we will close public comment for Article 27 and now move to Article 25. Which is a zoning bylaw amendment related to accessory dwelling units. And I will turn it over to Director Ricker. I'm sorry. I will turn it first back over to the board for Article 27. Are there any final comments? My apologies, I jumped the gun with that one. Steve?
Yeah, one of the things I think one of the motivations for wanting to remove Article 27, aside from the fact that it is out of date, is that it does create a little bit of ambiguity over who has jurisdiction over wetland areas. It should be the Conservation Commission. They're very good at their job. And to the extent that we have a bylaw and wetland protection law that, both put two groups of jurisdiction, that creates some ambiguity, and I believe that opens us up to the potential of needless challenges and appeals. So I'm very supportive of the recommendation of removing this overlay district.
Great, thank you very much. Jean?
I have no other comments.
Shayna?
Nothing further.
And Ken?
No.
Great. I really want to thank you, David, for coming in this evening. I think that was very clear, and I appreciate the additional detail that you were able to provide this evening. And as was suggested by the board, I think having much of that in the background reading material will be very, very helpful this year. So thank you very much. Okay. All right, so now let's go ahead and move to Article 25, the zoning bylaw amendment related to accessory dwelling units.
Great, thank you. So this warrant article seeks to bring our current ADU regulations as they apply to ADUs in line with the recent legislation passed at the state level to encourage production of ADUs throughout the Commonwealth. And so this article seeks to bring our ADU laws in compliance with what the state has published as their regulations.
Great, thank you very much. So I will first turn this over to Jean for discussion.
Yeah, thank you, and that's because I emailed Rachel and Claire earlier today. So I emailed Town Council and the head of inspectional services this weekend for some information about this, and then had a conversation with Town Council this afternoon about this, and he and I agreed, and let me just pull this up here so I can tell you what he and I agreed. So part of the proposal, which would keep the 6-foot setback, is based on zoning bylaw section 5.4.2B7, which is the setback requirements for garages. And Town Council and I, after close reading and discussion, determined that section does not apply to ADUs, but only to garages and not to other accessory buildings. And I spoke with the head of inspectional services to try to get an idea about 5.4.2B7, which is separate setback for garages based upon type and roof, whether the same criteria would apply to accessory buildings like ADUs. And he said that they would not, that those criteria only apply to garages and not to anything else. So based upon that and the idea that we are allowed to be more permissive than the state law when it comes to allowing ADUs, but we're not allowed to be more restrictive, I've proposed an alternative reading just for one little part of this, which is the proposed redraft of E 5.10.2B1E. And it's similar to what's here. And I'm sorry I didn't provide enough copies, so I'll read this out loud. It would read, an accessory dwelling unit may be located in 1, the same building as a principal dwelling unit or as an expansion to such building. 2, a building that is attached to the principal dwelling unit, or 3, an accessory building that conforms to the setback requirements of this bylaw for accessory structures in the district where it is located, open parentheses, that's what's required by the regulations, state regulations, which accessory building shall not constitute a principal or main building by the incorporation of the accessory building unit, provided that if such accessory building unit is located within the setback, then such accessory dwelling unit shall be allowed only if the Board of Appeals, acting pursuant to Section 3.3, grants a special permit upon its finding that the location of such accessory dwelling unit is not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the use of such accessory building as a private garage or allowed use. So basically what we've done simply is to mimic what the state regulations are, which is they need to conform to the setback rules for accessory structures in the district where they're located, but then keeping the rest of what's in here, which allows the ZBA to change that if it's in the setback based upon finding it's no more detrimental to the neighborhood. So that's my proposal. And then we would clearly need to make some changes to the background information to talk about that. And we might want to add to the background information a reference to the EOHLC regulations. So if people want to go and look at them, because you know, the law had almost nothing in it, and all we're talking about now is how we're going to comply with the state regulations. So, but that's the only change that I would suggest after going through this and discussing it with town council. So some of you may say, isn't it a rule that you can't require a special permit for an ADU? And the answer is, it is a rule for those that would otherwise be allowed. But because we're allowing them as long as they meet the setback requirements for accessory units, we can also allow more by special permit. So this doesn't violate the requirement for special permits in the state regulations. So
It's not
that's
more
what I've done.
restrictive.
It is not. It is not. It is
Correct.
It is not more restrictive.
If I
Great. Thank you, Steve.
Well, I'll start with a question for Mr. Benson. I mean, just at a high level, what is the difference between your proposed language and the existing B1E? I mean, not in terms of words, but in terms of function, because the existing language would basically say if you honor the setbacks, you're allowed to do it, but if you are closer, if you provide less setback than required, then you need a special permit.
Well, the difference is that one talks about 6 feet. Not all the setbacks are 6 feet. So there are some areas where, in some of the zoning districts, it's like 10 feet. So what do you do if somebody's 10 feet and 6 feet? There's no, it's silent on that. So I think there were at least a couple sort of flaws in the way it was written, and I hope this fixed those flaws.
All right, thank you for that clarification.
Anything else, Steve?
Oh, yes.
Go for it. The floor.
So in the, I noticed a small typo in the background section under item E. There is the phrase commuter rails station. I believe rail should be singular. We received a written comment from a member of the public regarding this warrant article, and I would like to address 2 items from that. The first regarding the Dover Amendment. I believe the mention of the Dover Amendment is appropriate because in the whatever the act was, it was like Chapter 150 of the Acts of 2024, Section 8 adds a section to, a paragraph to Section 3A that, basically adds accessory dwelling units to the set of uses protected by the Dover Amendment. It may be worth adding a citation to that, to The Affordable Homes Act, yes, Section 8, for...
Section 7.
I pulled it off the legislature's website, so it said Section 8 there.
The 7 and 8.
Oh, okay. Regardless. And one other one, which I believe we discussed this in the past, but I don't remember where we landed. There is, towards the end of 7103, there is a provision that says it's labeled special permits for multiple ADUs on the same lot. And it basically says if a municipality chooses to allow additional ADUs on the same lot as a protected use ADU in a single-family residential zoning district, zoning shall require a special permit for the use of land or structures for additional ADUs. And the letter from the member of the public was saying, well, the word shall seems mandatory there, and I'm wondering, should we have something to that, something in effect to that? I think that's all my questions.
Great, thank you, Steve. Shana, we'll leave Steve's question open for discussion, and Shana, anything you might have as well?
Yeah, I think one thing we discussed last time that I don't think I see resolved here is the conversion of a garage or other structure that is already within the setback into an ADU. And I'm wondering, Jean, if any of the language that you proposed impacts that.
Didn't change what was there now. So whatever they were doing now, they could still do.
Yep, and do you recall what that was?
I believe it was allowed by special permit.
That's what I think so, too.
By special permit, and that's the same,
Right.
yes, that Jean's proposing.
Yeah, unless, except if it's outside the setback, then you're not
Then
going
it's
to
not.
It's,
Okay.
it's the, as long as it's determined to be significantly, not significantly
More detrimental.
Yep.
than the existing use.
Okay. That's all.
Great, thank you. Ken?
I had the same question, but I'm still not quite sure. Do I understand it correctly? If someone builds a garage, which is less restrictive than a detached garage, sorry,
No.
it's less restrictive as far as setbacks, and then a year later decide to turn that into ADU, they're allowed to do that.
Then they're going to need a
Special permit.
Don't need special, it's within the setback,
Within the setback.
even though it's pre-existing.
Because it's a garage and there are different rules for garages.
Okay, so that's the thing I had a question for before, and I thought, they were sort of gaining something, That's all.
Great. Thank you, Steve.
I do have one more question. Regarding the proposed change to B1B, where it's basically, I think the effect of it would be, like currently, if one were to build a large addition for the purpose of constructing an ADU, an applicant would have to go before the ZBA, get permission for the large addition, but the ADU would be allowed by right. And it looks like the intent of B1B is to exempt the part of a potential large addition that's used for a protected use ADU. Is that the general gist?
That's the way I read it.
Okay. Well, I think I think that's in the spirit of what the legislature was trying to do in terms of, encouraging the production of accessory dwelling units. So I actually like that change.
Great. Anything else? Steve, you had a question. Do you feel, there was a question I believe that you had for the board. Did you feel that your question was answered?
I don't think we answered it.
Okay, then let's do that before we move on.
So I get a little lost in the hierarchy of numberings of 760 CMR 71, but, I'm going to punt over that and say 760 CMR 71.04, data collection, go up 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs. It's...
Steve, does it seem to be under short-term rentals? Like it's C, short-term rentals, so it's all related to short-term rentals?
See. So there's 3, no, I think, yeah, so I think this 3, we have 3, this C is under the 3, and then there is 4, 5, and 6. It's a big tree.
So 760 CMR
760 CMR 71.
71.
I believe you would read it as okay. So it's in 71.03. Subsection, and then it's a paragraph 5, just shortly before 7104. But the basic...
Permits, special permits for ADUs on the same lot?
Yes.
Notwithstanding 71.031. So your question, if that shall means that we need to rework the section where multiple ADUs are permitted?
Yes.
Do you want, would it be helpful for town council to weigh in on that, or do you want to just discuss that?
Well, if to the extent that I always value town council's advice. So if we can get an opinion from them, that's fine, but
Okay.
otherwise, I believe we had an earlier iteration that contained language that would have done this, and it may be worth restoring that. That's all.
Okay. Jean, did you have any read on this one?
No, I think it's
71.03.
mysterious.
Okay.
Well, on the other hand, under the principle that, we can do things that are less restrictive than the state law, but not more restrictive.
Right.
There are cases where we would allow 2 ADUs on the same lot because our bylaws basically says 1 ADU per principal dwelling.
I mean, that's it. The only place we would allow it is in a two-family.
Right.
Where, how likely is that I mean, it's almost worth making a call to EOHLC and see what they meant by this.
Claire, is that something that we can do to get a reading? We'll request one both from town council as well as
Sure.
ELHSC.
Staff is happy to follow up with that.
Perfect, thank you very
Yeah,
much.
I think if they can tell us what they meant by this regulation, then we can know what to do about it.
Perfect.
Right.
All right, anything else? All right, so we'd like to open up the discussion for Article 25 for public comment. Does anyone wish to speak this evening? Please go ahead. And again, remind everyone speaking, please introduce yourself with even if you've spoken before, with your first, last name, and address. And you'll have up to 2 minutes to address the board. Thank you.
Winnell Evans, 20 Orchard Place. And now let me get back to my carefully crafted notes here. Just 4 points that I want to make, and I will be very brief. The memo from planning to the ARB dated January 10th, 2025, talked about the staff meeting between planning, the ARB, the ZBA, Town Council, and Inspectional Services. And the comment was, the consensus among the group is there are no safety or logistical reasons to require an ADU be set back 6 feet from a property line, and removing this provision would reduce the number of applications that require ZBA approval and streamline the approval process. So it raises a couple of scenarios for me. What about abutting ADUs, which could conceivably be both right on the lot line? What about 2 or more ADUs on a single lot that might start to become very, very full? So I, as a town meeting member, I would have a very hard time voting for any amendments to ADU bylaws that completely did away with setbacks. And also personally, I would have a really hard time voting for that as somebody who spent many vacations sitting on my deck because I couldn't afford to go anyplace else. My second point is in the language that Jean addressed, and I really wish I had your revision of that. So I'm just going to ask about that then. If an accessory building must be located within 6 feet of a lot line, and in the current language, or the current proposed language, it must also be located entirely within the rear yard setback. I'm not really sure how to picture that. Does that mean within the setback from the lot line to where the setback ends? I'm having a hard time picturing that. So that's second point. My third point is I could not find anywhere in the zoning bylaw a definition of a type 1, 2, and 3 garage. So I would love to know what those are and how they're different. And I also echo, I believe, Ms. Corman's comment about what about garages that are converted into ADUs, and how do all these different types of garages and their varying setbacks then play into that, and what is to stop a developer from developing a lot, putting up a garage, and then a couple of years it's becoming an ADU. So that's a concern. And my final comment is, if no owner occupancy requirement shall be imposed on either the primary residence or the ADU, how would this affect our current prohibition on selling an ADU separately from the principal dwelling? And how does that not essentially mean that all R0 and R1 districts are now two-family? So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. As I mentioned before, we'll take all questions and then address those at the end. I do have those all written down. Anyone else? Please. Yes, Mr. Warden. Yes, that's you. And we can move the microphone once you're set there. You are.
Thank you. John Worden, 27 Jason Street. Yeah, I have a couple questions. What, as you conceive it right now, I'm speaking of the ADU in a separate structure, separate building, maybe. I don't know. What are the rules right now where that could be built in your bylaw? And I don't think it's very clear. What is it? The side yard is 10 feet, and the backyard is 20 feet. I think that's generally in the R1 and R2 and R0 districts. And if I understand, so do I understand you correctly? It's really, again, really hard. Maybe it's my hearing to pick up all the stuff. But is the idea that you can't build within those setbacks unless you have a special permit from the zoning board?
We can clarify. I think there were several questions around the setbacks, so at the end of public comment, we will make those clarifications. That was, I think, some of the questions that the speaker before you had as well.
You're going to need that when you get to town meeting.
Absolutely. So we'll answer that question this evening.
All right, next question. Suppose someone comes and says, I want to build a huge addition to my house for an ADU. And so I think it was said, well, then you don't have to adhere to the town's large addition bylaw, which, as you may know, that was a controversial thing because people were getting away with some weird stuff before we had that. And then after he does this large addition ADU, he says, well, no, I think I'll just use that as a larger part of my house. And so he gets around our bylaw by calling it an ADU. Is there some way to protect against that?
That's another question that we can dive into. I do have that on our list.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Anyone else wishing to speak regarding ADUs? Yes, please, if you could come forward.
Hi, Marina Popova, Rich Street. I also have a question. I'm just not clear about the ownership. So, I mean, is this scenario possible where a developer would just buy a single-family house or two-family house and erase that and then just build, a new whatever house and an ADU, or a new two-family and two ADUs because there is no requirement for ownership? Or is it at least somebody has to own the primary residence? I guess I'm just not clear about that, because if it is the first scenario, then I would assume that as soon as that is approved, then everyone will start just very quickly getting the single whatever family houses, erasing or whatever, and building immediately the ADU because the ownership is not required. I think that's why we did not see so many ADUs before, because it had to be the owner who would want to use the backyard for that, and not everyone probably does. So that's my question.
Thank you. We can clarify the new state regulations regarding ownership. Any other questions? All right. So at this time, we'll close public comment on this article, and I will read off these questions. Jean, I know you and Steve have spent a significant amount of time. I'll direct them, Steve, to you first.
Sure.
The first question was around, there were two questions around abutting ADU, several regarding the rear yard setbacks. So one was around abutting ADUs who might both be within the setbacks, and whether that is a condition that would be allowable, given that those are both required to, the redevelopment within a setback is subject to the purview of a special permit.
Yeah,
Can you discuss that?
my recollection of that comment, it seemed to be based on the memo for this week, section B1E, and Mr. Brenson proposed a different set of language. So under what's in the memo, if it were within 6 feet of a lot line and entirely within the rear yard setback, well, then it's allowed by right. But with the changes that you suggested and the way our bylaw works today, if it's within 6 feet, then it requires a special permit. And that happens regardless of whether you're building new or whether you're taking, yes, you can build a garage and then a couple of years later apply for a special permit to put an ADU in. Yes.
Yes. So that would mean that if that would be something that would be reviewed by the ZBA.
Correct.
With regard to the ability for more than for two on adjoining lots to potentially be developed. So those would be subject with this revision to both to special permit.
Yeah, and I would imagine that if you have the case of two adjoining on separate lots, then you do have fire codes that come into play.
This is one thing that I spoke with the head of inspectional services about. If the ADU's on the lot line it has to have significant fire protection built into it. Additionally, if it's on the lot line, it can't have a window overlooking. And apparently, the farther away you get from the lot line, the larger amount of glass area you can have. So I think he said it's some, this is in the state building code, so it's some percentage. The greater distance you are, the larger percentage of window you can have. So if there are two ADUs right up next to each other, no windows are allowed to be facing each other, and they have to meet fire code standards. If I might answer the question about type 1, type 2, type 3, yeah, I didn't know that either. It's in the building, state building code. It's applicable to garages, not to ADUs. And our zoning bylaw makes it applicable to garages.
Great, thank you. The next was whether or not two ADUs, two or more, are allowed on a single lot.
So this was the issue that we were discussing earlier. So under our current bylaw, we allow one ADU per principal structure. So if you had a single-family home, you could have one. If you had a two-family home, each dwelling could have a separate ADU. And we were discussing a provision in HLC's regulations that say a special the regulation involves the requirement of a special permit for an ADU that is not a protected use ADU, which basically means a second or third. And we're going to hear from town council about that.
Great, thank you.
May I very quickly say, isn't our regulation one ADU per unit?
Per principal dwelling.
Per principal dwelling, yes.
Per principal dwelling unit, not per structure.
Yeah, so a two-family home can have two ADUs.
Yes, thank you.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yes.
If there's a two-family house, each family can have an ADU.
Yes.
That's in our current bylaw.
Then that comes 4 units in that one building.
Yes.
And by handicap code, one of those units have to be handicapped now, right? Because it's 4 units. Or does this thing here exclude that?
My understanding, the fact that you have, there are accessory dwellings units rather than primary dwelling units does not excuse them from requirements of the accessibility or building codes. That one's a little bit tricky. Boston's ADU guidelines get into a lot more detail about like fire codes and how many like when you need to put in sprinklers and when you need fire separation, and it's based on the number of dwellings, and I don't actually know the answer, but I presume that the Architectural Access Board requirements would still apply as well.
I would assume as well, but let's confirm with Mike Champa.
Thank you.
Okay, the next one is a question around an ADU being situated entirely within the rear yard setback and whether or not that is permissible.
Well, we sort of covered that before, and then regarding which is a rear yard, there is an illustration in the bylaw. Basically, the rear yard is everything to the rear of the house, including the sides. The side and the front yard is things in the front, and the side yards don't extend into the front yard or side yard. But to answer fundamentally, if someone were proposing an ADU that was entirely within the rear yard and it met the setback requirements, then it would be allowed by right.
Great, thank you.
And that's the way it is now, and this wouldn't be changed under this proposal.
So in other words, no ADUs in the side setback and no L-shaped that might wrap around into the side setback.
Well, if they go into the setback both now and as proposed, they would need to get a special permit from the ZBA, who would have to find that it's no more detrimental than other structures. So that's not changed by this.
Yeah, I don't see anything in here that would prohibit the construction of an ADU that was partially in a side yard, provided it met the setback requirements.
Great. And all of these, so to ask the question, does this relate to garages that are converted? Yes. These requirements that we're discussing do relate to garages that are converted. The owner occupancy question, do you want to top line for everyone how the owner occupancy change will affect Arlington?
So per the regulations, we cannot impose an owner occupancy requirement. So this potentially means that someone could build a brand-new house that's got an accessory dwelling unit in it. I kind of suspect that might have been the legislature's intent. Whether or not this is economically feasible remains to be seen, but I believe it would be possible.
The point is they have to be under common ownership. That's clear from our bylaw, and that hasn't changed. So if somebody builds a principal dwelling and an ADU on the same lot, they have to be in common ownership. They can't. One of them can't be sold without the other. Mm-hmm. They can't be condoized.
The next item, we talked about clarification of when you can build within the setbacks. There was a question around the large addition bylaw and when this comes into play with regard to ADUs.
So under flipping the section number, under the proposal in B1B, that's in this week's memo, so the portion of the large addition that would be used for an ADU would be exempt from the large addition provision. So hypothetically, one could build an ADU and then convert it to part of the house. But, the question, I think, is this practical? Because the ADU has to have separate entrances. It's got to have a separate kitchen. It's got to have a separate bathroom. It would just be easier for them to go and get the special permit if they wanted a bigger addition.
I mean, the other thing I'll add is the ADU cannot exceed 900 square feet. So, right now the rule is you can build up to 750 square feet in ADU, but if you go between 750 and 900, you need a special permit. The state law said, however, you can build up to 900 and you can't require a special permit. That's why we have to change this to say you can build up to 900 without a special permit. They can't build more than 900 because it wouldn't be an ADU anymore. And it's 900 or half the floor area of the principal dwelling, whichever is less. So in some instances, they won't be up to 900, but 900 is the max.
Great. Thank you, Jean and Steve. And we've already answered the ownership question with regard to the common ownership between the ADU and the principal dwelling unit. Any other discussion points? Ken?
Nope.
Shayna? Steve? Jean?
No.
Okay. Great. So with that, we will move to our last zoning article hearing for this evening, which is Article 26, a zoning bylaw amendment related to transportation demand management planning. And I will hand it over to Director Ricker.
Great, thank you. At our board retreat in December and a few subsequent meetings, the board indicated interest in potentially revising the conditions for transportation demand management reduction in parking. And so staff has drafted a couple amendments and taken the recommendations of the board as we've moved through this process to come up with a warrant article that that more clearly and I think more deliberately would allow the board to achieve parking reductions for smaller scale projects than are otherwise that our current transportation demand management strategies tend to apply to larger projects.
Great, thank you very much. So I'd like to turn it over to the board for discussion on the proposed zoning bylaw modifications, starting with Ken.
No, I have no questions.
Okay. I wanted to identify one of the provisions that I think we had some challenges and wanted to think about a little bit more was the provide a guaranteed emergency ride home. That was not particularly well defined. And I think that with the addition of the additional modifications that we've added, that's one that I might move that we strike. There was also, I had a question around the change, let me just get to the right item here. The wording around changing from employ to propose is, to me, making that change takes away the onus to implement. So my question was whether or not we wanted to change that to incorporate or implement, and again, something that goes beyond the theoretical to ensuring that this is a requirement to action on this.
Makes sense.
And I'm open to whatever word we decide to use, again, whether it was incorporate or implement, were my two thoughts. Shana?
Item 10, we had discussed some of the provisions of item 10 previously, and I think where it has come down is more onerous than I would advocate for. I would, I think, reduce or eliminate the requirements around frequency of bus service, frequency and hours of bus service, and would suggest considering increasing the permitted distance of foot walk to a subway station or bus stop to up to 1,320, which is a quarter mile, as opposed to what it is now, which is a 660-foot walk,
It's an eighth of a mile.
Which is about a 2-minute walk-ish.
Great, thank you. Shana, Jean?
I agree with your proposed change, Bob. I think number 10 is the right way. This is the same discussion we had last time. If somebody wants to get a parking reduction and they want to say they're near a subway station or a bus stop, it should be some subway station or bus stop. And in Arlington, it's going to be a bus stop where people can go there and they can expect the bus 7 days a week, and they can expect it 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Because if you don't, people are going to say, I need a car in town. The 660-foot walk thing is interesting because clearly I think the data is about, I looked this up last time, so I might not have it right, something like 80% of people would walk up to a quarter mile to get to a bus stop. But we're talking about Arlington that has hills. We're talking about Arlington that has snow and ice and cold weather lots of times. And we're talking about Arlington and trying to be responsive to older people who can't walk that quarter mile that often and don't want to do it in snowy and icy conditions. This is the exact same thing I said last time. We don't have to have number 10 here at all, obviously, since it's not there now. But if we have it in, I think we need it and somebody wants to use it, and they can certainly use some of these others, but if they want to use it, I think we have to make it something that we really expect somebody to say, oh, there's a bus stop nearby, I don't need a car. Or there's a bus stop nearby, I only need one car. And they're going to do that if it's the 77 bus. They're not going to do it if it's the bus that's going to be running down Pleasant Street, which is just going to run once an hour and, just goes between Arlington Center and Waltham. So letting somebody say, I'm putting a project on Pleasant Street because whatever that new number bus is going to be, is sufficient, I think is just the wrong way to look at this. And I just couldn't agree to this without these provisions in it. And again, people can use 1 through 11 without 10 if they want to get the reduction.
Thank you, Jean. Steve?
A couple of things. One is just a wording change, and there's some new text proposed at the end of 615C, except projects with fewer than 10 residential units and with less than 3,000 square feet of commercial space must provide at least 2 TDM methods, etc. I kind of wonder if we should have a comma and the word which between space and must. So that would then read, except projects with fewer than 10 residential units and with less than 3,000 square feet of commercial space, comma, which must propose at least 2 TDM methods described below. To the chair's note about propose, I do like provide or implement or something that has more of a mandatory sound to it. Regarding the frequency, I think I'm a little more aligned with Ms. Corman Houston, but I can negotiate. I would prefer, my gut feeling is a quarter mile, that's a 5-minute walk, but I could understand the desire to go down to something smaller. I would agree that the bus should run 7 days a week, but I would like to, if to the extent that we retain frequency, I would like to see a frequency requirement that accommodates the 87 bus. Because Broadway is one of our corridors, and I think it does have opportunity, and also because the 87 is my bus. But I like us to think a little bit more about that, either omitting the frequency requirement or adjusting it so that the 87 bus would qualify. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Ken, did you have anything?
Now I'm thinking of it. Where we say provide showers for business or industrial use, I run into the problem with the plumbing inspector here in town, where when you provide a shower, he's requiring a full bathroom. So it's just not a shower. So should we change the shower to bathroom, or knowingly that by saying shower, it's going to be a bathroom?
We use this provision on the storage facility at Dudley Street.
And is there a full bathroom in there?
If my recollection was that they had a full bathroom and they added a shower to it.
Yes, but this thing is implying that you just put a shower in there and that's it.
Okay.
All right? And the plumbing inspector is not allowing that.
I think the intent is for it to be a shower room, and that is consistent with how many jurisdictions, plumbing inspector may change, but our intent is that it's a shower room. And whether the plumbing inspector currently requires a bathroom, that is not consistent with every jurisdiction, and given that may shift, I think our intent is if permissible for it to be a shower room. There are other places where there are bathrooms. Required.
I'm agreeing with that. I'm just saying
Yeah.
that the stipulation has consequences more than just that, that's all. Like Gene said, you could pick three. I mean,
One further, regarding the guaranteed ride home, to me, that sort of meant something to the effect of, well, if you have to stay here and you miss the last bus, we'll get you a cab. I don't think there's a lot of, I mean, to me, it seems adequate on its own, but.
That's, I mean, if the rest of the board feels that that's an adequate provision and that's something that they could demonstrate to us, I'm fine with leaving it in. I just felt like it was difficult to identify. Go ahead, Gene.
Going back to the 87 bus, it doesn't run into Arlington on Sunday. It ends in Somerville. So I don't think I would want the provision to apply
No,
to a
I
bus
think
that doesn't run 7 days a week.
I agree. Thank you for bringing that up.
So I just want to speak to the frequency, or not the frequency, rather the distance. I also agree that with Shana's suggestion that a quarter mile is a more appropriate walking distance. It's more consistent with other standards that I see, including the LEED standard and other standards which identify or recognize transportation access as part of their requirements or provisions. I think that 7 days a week would be an appropriate frequency. We got into this discussion before around if it's 30 minutes and the bus comes every 32 minutes, do they technically not meet the provisions of the bylaw? And the specificity around that, I think, could be a challenge, but I could get behind the number of days per week and the quarter mile.
So I could live with the quarter mile if we keep the scheduled every 30 minutes. The bus might be late, but this is scheduled, not actual. And the 7 days per week. Right now, the 77 bus is the only bus in town that would meet this requirement. The nice thing about having this requirement is we can bang on the T's door occasionally about needing to sort of provide this otherwise. If we wanted to extend it to the 87 bus, it would have to be every 40 minutes, Monday through Saturday between the hours of 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. I'd prefer not, because again, there are so many other ways that people can get this.
Yeah, and I think the 7 day a week requirement is important. Right,
since the 45 minutes though?
Well, it doesn't make any difference because no bus will meet the other one either. The 77's I get out every 15 minutes on schedule.
7 days a week?
Sundays?
Yeah, I think so.
Let's check that out.
Let's check that out.
Well, assuming while they're checking it out, I would be okay with provided the 77 meets the stated frequency requirements in item 10. I'd be happy with a quarter mile.
Yep. 15 minutes the entire day. or every 20 minutes on weekends.
Every 20 minutes on weekends?
On weekends, yeah, and 15 minutes.
So it would meet the 30-minute requirement?
Yep, easily.
Every day of the
For
week?
schedule.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So quarter mile, 30-minute frequency, 7 days a week. And I know you're
Yeah.
still concerned about that.
Yep, still concerned about that, but if the rest of the board is comfortable, I could get behind that.
Okay. And do we have a preference on the changing the word propose to implement or provide?
I like provide.
I like provide.
Let's do that.
So you have to do it in 2 places.
What number are you talking
There
about?
are 2 places.
Yeah.
Let me just get the 2 locations for you. In 6.1.5C, where the word employ was struck and propose was added, I'm suggesting to change that to provide, so that it's not just propose, but also means to implement. And then that same word is in the 2 lines down in the section that's added where it speaks to 3,000 square feet of commercial space must, instead of propose, provide there as well. Okay. Anything else on the proposed modifications to Article 26? All right, so at this point, we will open this item up for public comment. Anyone wishing to speak, please raise your hand. Okay, so with that, I'll turn it back to the board. Any additional discussion for Article 26?
Nothing here.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Okay, all right. So at this point, that concludes our hearings this evening for 2025 annual town meeting. Is there a motion to continue the public hearing for the articles for 2025 town meeting to the evening of March 17th?
So motioned.
Second,
We'll take a vote, starting with Steve.
Yes.
Jean.
yes.
Shayna.
Yes.
Ken.
Yes.
I am a yes as well. So that concludes agenda item number 4. We'll now move to agenda item number 5, which is open forum. So if anyone here wishes to speak at open forum, could you please raise your hand? All right, seeing none, we will close open forum and move to new business, and I will hand it over to Director Ricker.
Great, thank you. I appreciate folks responding to my request for a meeting following your meeting on April 7th so that staff can turn around the ARB report in time for it to be printed and included in the packets for town meeting. It looks like April 10th is an acceptable day for folks. I think we will start, there was only one member who indicated a preference for time. I believe we would start at 7. We can potentially run this meeting as a hybrid meeting for members, but just a meeting to review and vote on to accept the ARB report. So thank you.
Great.
Do we have a location for the meeting?
We can meet in the first floor conference room where we have met prior to town meeting in the past, or we can meet in this room. I can set the location and certainly get that information out to folks. Sure.
Was there a desire for some to hold the meeting earlier or later, or is 7 to 7 work for everyone?
Works for me.
It works for
Works for me.
Okay, great. And thank you in advance to the staff. I know that is a very, very tight turnaround. So as we go through these discussion items, I know this evening there were several revisions and requests for additions. I think that the further out in advance we can provide that information to the staff, the better, so that we don't place an undue burden on their team. Great. Any other new business? Steve?
Yes.
No.
Yeah. So a couple weeks ago, I discovered that Massachusetts has an Unlocking Housing Production Commission. And they released a report called Building for Tomorrow at the end of last month. So it's a fairly lengthy document, and it covers a lot of different areas. They're basically, this commission was looking at how do we produce more housing of various types in the Commonwealth. And, they break it down into 4 categories. One is economic incentives and workforce development, land use and zoning. Another is regulation, codes, and permitting. And finally, statewide planning and local coordination. So it's comprehensive. But some of the land use and zoning recommendations, picking a couple from the list in the report. One was to eliminate parking minimum statewide for residential use. Another was to require municipalities to establish TDM requirements as a condition for allowing off-street parking, which I thought was kind of interesting. They recommend that the Commonwealth should allow 2-family homes on all residential lots and 4-family homes where the lot is served by existing water and sewer infrastructure. They also suggest eliminating minimum lot sizes and incentivizing or requiring zoning to align with comprehensive plans, which, they don't have to do that at all today. Now, this is just a commission, and it's a set of recommendations rather than policy decisions. There is another document I read recently was the HLC's housing needs assessment, and sort of like the short story on that is 220,000 new homes in the next 10 years. So in Massachusetts. And that's to accommodate for growing families, people's changing lifestyles, the adult child that doesn't want to live with their parents, the adult parent that doesn't want to live with their children, people forming households, downsizing, et cetera. So we have smaller households, so even with a population that's staying the same size, smaller households means you need more houses.
Great. Would you be able to provide the highlights of that report that you just went through?
Sure, I will happily do that and send the actual document itself.
Fabulous. Thank you. That would be great to read. Any other new business? Jean?
I have a couple things. First, I want to correct something I said at the last meeting. The PDF zoning map does have the housing overlay districts on them. So I had said that the PDF map did not, but they do. On the other hand, the GIS map still doesn't. And as of the other day, none of the assessors' cards show the zoning overlay district. They only show the base zoning on the cards. So they still need some work. The second thing is I read some of the report, the first report that Steve referenced, and I just found it interesting to see who was on the committee, because you could have almost predicted the outcome by who was on the committee.
Great. Thank you, Jean. Shayna, any new business?
No.
Ken?
No.
All right. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So motioned.
Second.
Take a vote, starting with Steve.
Yes.
Jean?
Yes.
Shayna?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. This meeting is adjourned.